The hush before the applause, the weight of a world waiting, the voice that soared effortlessly through stadiums yet whispered its own pain in the quiet of her soul. This was Karen Carpenter. A contradiction wrapped in velvet and vulnerability, she offered the world melodies of unparalleled sweetness while battling a silent war within. Her songs spoke of longing and heartbreak, but the deepest ache was her own, a constant hunger for control in a life where so much felt beyond her grasp. Karen Ann Carpenter entered the world on March 2, 1950, in New Haven, Connecticut, the second child of Harold and Agnes Carpenter. From the outset, she was the quiet counterpoint to her older brother Richard, a child prodigy whose musical gifts were evident early on. Their childhood home, though not impoverished, was steeped in the quiet rhythms of suburban life, yet it vibrated with Richard's incessant practicing, the grand piano a constant presence. For Karen, music wasn't an immediate calling. It was more like a background hum, a comforting, sometimes overwhelming companion. Her interests leaned toward sports, a tomboy spirit eager for the freedom of the outdoors. But a deeper current ran beneath her energetic exterior, a quiet desire to be seen, to be acknowledged, perhaps to finally step out of the shadow of her brother's brilliance. The move to Downey, California in 1963 was meant to be a fresh start, a sunnier landscape for Richard's burgeoning musical ambitions. It was there, amidst the palm trees and the endless summer, that Karen found her voice, almost by accident. In high school band, she picked up a drum kit, a percussive rebellion against the expected. She wasn't just a drummer. She was a natural, her rhythm innate, her timing impeccable. And then there was the voice. A voice so pure, so rich, so effortlessly perfect. It seemed to materialize from the very air around her. It was a contralto, warm and resonant, capable of conveying profound emotion without ever resorting to showiness. When she first sang with Richard, harmonizing in their parents' living room, it wasn't a performance. It was an unfolding, a revelation. It was the sound of two halves finding their whole, a brother and sister intertwining their destinies in a way neither fully understood at the time. Music, which had been Richard's domain, now became a shared language, a bridge between them. But even then, amidst the nascent joy of creation, there was a subtle imbalance, a gentle push and pull that would define their careers and, ultimately, their lives. Karen, the drummer, the singer, the one whose voice would soon captivate millions, was already beginning to navigate the complex currents of her own identity within the powerful orbit of her brother's musical vision. The path to stardom for the Carpenters was not paved with instant success, but rather with a series of quiet, persistent struggles, each one chipping away at their youthful idealism, yet solidifying their resolve. They honed their craft in college, playing in various small groups, experimenting with sounds, and tirelessly sending out demo tapes. Rejection became a familiar companion, a stack of polite, often dismissive letters that landed with a thud. They performed in dimly lit clubs, the clinking of glasses and murmurs of conversation often drowning out their carefully arranged harmonies. There were talent shows where they didn't win, auditions that led nowhere, and the constant financial strain of pursuing a dream with no guaranteed return. Karen, ever the stoic, absorbed these setbacks, her quiet determination hardening with each no. Richard, the visionary, refused to be deterred, convinced of their unique sound. The emotional toll was subtle but profound. Doubt, like a persistent shadow, followed them. Were they good enough? Was their sound too soft, too different for the evolving music landscape of the late 60s? The breakthrough, when it finally arrived, came not with a bang, but with a whisper. AM Records co-founder Herb Alpert heard their demo, a stripped-down, melancholic version of the Beatles' Ticket to Ride. It was Karen's voice that captivated him, a voice that was at once innocent and profoundly knowing, capable of conveying immense vulnerability and strength. It wasn't the bombastic rock of the era. It was something else entirely, a balm, a quiet comfort. Signing with AM in 1969 felt like a miracle. the culmination of years of quiet perseverance. But even in this moment of triumph, the seeds of future struggles were being sown. The public, and even their label, saw them as the clean-cut, wholesome face of easy listening, a stark contrast to the countercultural movements sweeping the nation. Karen, always self-conscious about her weight and appearance, found herself under immediate scrutiny. The pressure to present a perfect image, to fit into a mold she didn't entirely recognize, began to take hold. She was no longer just a musician. She was becoming a public figure, her body and her voice inextricably linked in the public eye. The joy of finally being heard was immense, but it came with a new, insidious cost: the dawning realization that success often demanded a sacrifice of self. The spotlight years for the Carpenters were a dizzying kaleidoscope of triumphs and an accelerating spiral of private anxieties. Their sound, a meticulously crafted blend of Richard's intricate arrangements and Karen's impossibly pure vocals, became an unexpected phenomenon. From 1970 to 1975, they were omnipresent. "They Long to Be Close to You" became their breakout hit, a gentle anthem that resonated with millions. Then came "We've Only Just Begun," a song that encapsulated the hopeful innocence of young love, becoming a staple at weddings for decades. Hit after hit followed: "Rainy Days and Mondays," "Superstar," "Hurting Each Other," "Yesterday Once More," "Top of the World." Each song, a masterclass in melodic melancholy, cemented their place in musical history. Sold-out tours across continents became their reality. The roar of the crowd, the blinding stage lights, the sheer enormity of their fame was exhilarating, almost unbelievable. Karen, though often shy off stage, transformed under the spotlight. Her drumming was precise, her voice flawless, soaring effortlessly over Richard's arrangements. She radiated a quiet confidence, the applause a momentary balm to her burgeoning insecurities. They collected Grammys, adorned magazine covers, and were lauded as America's sweethearts. Yet behind the scenes, the polished facade began to crack. The grueling schedule of touring, recording, and promotion left little room for personal life. Karen, the drummer who loved to play, was increasingly pushed to the front, to be the voice, leaving her kit behind. This shift, while seemingly minor, was a significant emotional blow. It stripped away a part of her identity, one of the few areas where she felt truly in control. The demands for interviews, photo shoots, and television appearances were relentless. Every outfit, every public smile felt scrutinized. The constant comments about her weight, often casually delivered by journalists or even family, chipped away at her self-esteem. She began to experiment with diets, a subtle attempt to regain control in a life that felt increasingly dictated by others. The quiet loneliness after the applause faded was perhaps the most insidious aspect of their fame. Hotel rooms felt vast and empty. The camaraderie of the road often gave way to isolation. Richard, consumed by his own perfectionism and the pressures of creating hit after hit, became increasingly reliant on prescription drugs to cope with his own anxieties and insomnia. Karen, meanwhile, retreated further into herself, her struggles with body image escalating into a quiet, relentless battle with anorexia nervosa. The world saw the smiling, healthy-looking Karen on album covers, heard her comforting voice on the radio, but they didn't see the disappearing woman, the one who measured her worth in pounds, the one who found solace in the terrifying control of starvation. The emotional high of applause became a fleeting comfort, quickly replaced by the gnawing emptiness that fame seemed to amplify rather than diminish. The private cost of public glory was becoming devastatingly clear, a silent scream beneath the beautiful melodies. The pristine veneer of the Carpenters began to show significant cracks in the mid-1970s. While their music continued to sell millions, the internal pressure on Karen was reaching a critical point. Her struggle with anorexia nervosa, once a private torment, was becoming visibly apparent. Public appearances revealed a progressively thinner frame, her once healthy glow replaced by a fragile pallor. Yet the public, uneducated about eating disorders, often dismissed it as simply being too thin or stressed. The reality was far more dire. Anorexia for Karen was not simply about vanity, it was a desperate attempt to exert control in a life where she felt increasingly powerless. Her career, her image, even her choice of instruments seemed dictated by others, particularly Richard, who, while protective, was also undeniably the driving force behind their musical direction. There was a constant push-pull, Richard's vision for their sound often demanding meticulous perfection, and Karen's own quiet longing for a solo career, for the freedom to explore different musical avenues. The physical toll was immense, constant fatigue, dizziness, and the insidious internal monologue of self-denial. In 1975, exhausted and critically underweight, Karen collapsed on stage during a concert in Las Vegas. It was a terrifying moment, a stark, public manifestation of her private torment. The tour was canceled, and for the first time, the world got a glimpse behind the curtain of the seemingly perfect Carpenters. Around the same time, Richard's own struggles with addiction to Quaaludes, prescribed to combat his chronic insomnia and anxiety, became unsustainable. He too was forced to step away from the relentless demands of their career. The relentless pace, the pressure to maintain their wholesome image, and the profound personal challenges they faced had led both siblings to a breaking point. Karen's attempts to seek professional help for her eating disorder were met with varying degrees of understanding. Early treatments were often rudimentary, failing to grasp the psychological complexities of the illness. She tried to live independently, buying her own home, trying to assert a sense of normalcy and control over her life. In 1980, in a desperate attempt to find stability and happiness, she married Thomas Burris, a real estate developer. It was a whirlwind romance, a hopeful leap into a future that she desperately wanted to be different from her past. Yet, the marriage was turbulent, marked by financial strain and emotional distance, and quickly unraveled. "I married the wrong man," she reportedly confessed to friends, the heartbreak adding another layer of despair to her already fragile state. The internal collapse was not a sudden implosion, but a slow, agonizing erosion of her spirit, each personal and professional setback chipping away at her resilience, leaving her increasingly vulnerable to the very illness that was slowly consuming her. The turning point for Karen, or perhaps the turning away from a life that was slowly devouring her, arrived in a series of desperate, quiet decisions. After the Carpenters' forced hiatus due to Richard's and her own health crises, there was a glimmer of hope for a different path. While Richard was in recovery for his addiction, Karen seized a fleeting opportunity to assert her independence, a chance to define herself outside of the Carpenters' carefully constructed image. In 1979, she secretly began working on a solo album in New York City with renowned producer Phil Ramone. This wasn't just about making music, it was about reclaiming herself. She experimented with a more adult, contemporary sound, shedding the saccharine sweetness that had become synonymous with the Carpenters. It was a raw, vulnerable outpouring of her own artistic desires, a voice finally given permission to explore its own range, its own narrative. The album, though never officially released in her lifetime due to record label and Richard's disapproval, was a profound act of self-discovery. It was a defiant statement that she was more than just Karen Carpenter, the singer from the Carpenters. She was an artist in her own right, with her own distinct musical voice. The rejection of this solo work, however, was devastating. It felt like another profound invalidation, a confirmation that her individual identity was less important than the established brand. This setback, coupled with the escalating turmoil in her marriage, plunged her deeper into the grip of her illness. The hope for a personal and artistic renaissance was brutally extinguished, leaving her adrift once more. Despite this, a profound internal shift was taking place. The external demands of fame and expectation were beginning to fade in importance compared to the overwhelming need for survival. The turning point wasn't a grand public declaration, but a quiet, desperate decision to fight for her life. She sought more intensive, specialized treatment for her anorexia, traveling to New York to work with a therapist who truly understood the complexities of eating disorders. It was a painful, often frustrating process of refeeding and psychological exploration. For a time, it seemed she might actually win the battle. She gained weight, Her spirit seemed to lift, and she even made a few public appearances, seemingly healthier. It was a fragile hope, built on a foundation of profound vulnerability, a testament to her quiet courage in the face of an insidious disease. After the intense public glare of the spotlight years and the quiet devastation of her internal collapse, Karen Carpenter entered a chapter marked by a poignant struggle for normalcy, a desperate attempt to build a life beyond the confines of her fame and illness. This period, often overlooked in the narrative of her stardom, was a testament to her enduring humanity and her quiet longing for peace. The final years were a painful dance between hope and despair. She continued to pursue treatment for anorexia, the relentless illness that had consumed her for years. These were not glamorous trips to rehab, but often lonely, arduous journeys. She tried to live a quieter life, away from the demanding schedules and constant scrutiny. There were attempts at reconciliation with her estranged husband, Thomas Burris, moments of fleeting hope that their marriage could be salvaged, that she could find the domestic bliss she so deeply craved. But the wounds were too deep, the emotional chasms too wide. The divorce, finalized just months before her death, was another profound loss, another dream shattered. Her family, particularly her mother Agnes, remained a complicated presence. While there was love, there was also a deep-seated inability to fully comprehend the severity of Karen's illness, a tendency to minimize it or view it as a controllable choice. This lack of understanding, however unintentional, often left Karen feeling isolated and misunderstood, exacerbating her sense of loneliness. She sought solace in her private passions, collecting Disney memorabilia, enjoying quiet evenings with close friends who saw beyond the celebrity facade. These were the moments she was most herself, unadorned, unpressured, simply Karen. The silence after the spotlight, however, was often deafening. The roar of the crowd was replaced by the quiet hum of her own thoughts, the persistent whispers of an illness that clung to her with terrifying tenacity. She longed to return to the stage, to the music, but on her own terms, to share her voice without sacrificing her soul. There were discussions of a Carpenter's reunion, brief forays into the recording studio, tantalizing glimpses of a comeback. Yet the physical toll of her illness, coupled with the lingering emotional scars, made sustained work incredibly difficult. She carried the weight of her past successes and failures, the longing for a future that felt increasingly out of reach. In this period, her true humanity shone through, her resilience, her vulnerability, her quiet dignity in the face of insurmountable odds. She wasn't a superstar, she was a woman battling for her life, finding small pockets of peace amidst the relentless storm within. Karen Carpenter's voice, a phenomenon of warmth and purity, still echoes today, a haunting reminder of both exquisite beauty and profound tragedy. What she gave the world was a sound unlike any other, a voice that transcended genre, capable of conveying the deepest human emotions with effortless grace. Her songs became the soundtrack to millions of lives, offering comfort, solace, and a sense of shared humanity. She gave us melodies that wrapped around the heart like a gentle embrace, a comforting presence in a chaotic world. But what the world took from her was immeasurable: her autonomy, her peace, and ultimately, her life. The relentless pursuit of perfection, the suffocating demands of fame, the constant scrutiny of her appearance, and the tragic misunderstanding of her illness converged to create an environment that ultimately consumed her. Karen died on February 4, 1983, at the age of 32, her heart giving out from complications related to anorexia nervosa. Her death was a shock, a brutal awakening for a world that had celebrated her voice but had been largely blind to her suffering. Her legacy, however, is not simply one of sorrow. It is also a testament to the power of a voice that continues to resonate, a reminder of the quiet strength found in vulnerability. Her story forced a global conversation about eating disorders, bringing crucial awareness to illnesses that had long been shrouded in silence and shame. She became, unwittingly, a pioneer in mental health advocacy, her struggle opening doors for countless others to seek help. Today, her records continue to sell, Her songs played on radio waves and streaming services, a timeless reminder of her singular talent. Yet, when one listens closely, beyond the exquisite harmonies and the comforting melodies, one can almost hear the silence between the notes, the whisper of a life lived under an unbearable weight. The last lingering note of a song, fading into the quiet of an empty stage, leaving behind only the lingering resonance of a voice that was too beautiful and a soul that was too fragile for this world.